So here in Photoshop I have this photograph of myself. I'm going to use this as an example for creating Posterize in Photoshop. What it's going to do is it's going to separate the different tones that are in an image into a certain amount that I can control. So I can bring it down to like 3 or 4 tones, which would be black, white and 2 grays. Or I could drag that all the way up to 10, 12, 15 and it will give me more variety of grays in between. It's about trying to get the right balance, not too many in that it's overly complicated, but not too few. You want to have a good variety of grays. The more you have, the more three-dimensional your image is going to look. So here I have my photograph. It's black and white. If you have a color photograph and you want to create a black and white, especially if you're working from pencil, you can just go to Image, Adjustments, and then bring it down to Desaturate. A few other things you can do as well in Filter, Camera Raw Filter. You can play around with lighting here. Exposure brings in a lot of light. Less exposure takes away that light. So if I go for something around here where I've got nice contrast of light and dark, that will work fine for me here. You can add some shadows, but if you go too far down, things get too black and you want to keep some of that variety. So it's very subtle changes that you might bring in. Contrast here will give me more grays. If I bring it up, it'll just give me more blacks and whites. But it's about trying to find that right balance. I'm going to go for something like this. I think something like this is okay. So once I have this, I'm going to go to Posterize, which is in Image, Adjustments, the same place we were to Desaturate, except this time we're going up to Posterize. Now you can see here we've got a levels indicator. This is 4 levels of gray. We've got the black, we've got the white, we've got this gray, and then we've got that gray. In order for it to be more like, you know, a real scene, we need to bump those grays up because it's a little flat. So the more I bump it up, you see the more three-dimensional things become. The less I have, the flatter it is. So it's about trying to find the right balance. You don't want to have too many because you want to keep it realistic in terms of what you can achieve with your drawing. But something like this could work quite well, an 8, or you could bring it back down a little bit more. I think around the 8 mark works fine. You'll see that it does change a little bit once I press OK. Kind of smoothens it out a little. And then with this image then I can create a grid. So the next step here is to create a sheet that is more traditional in size. So I'm going to go with an A4, which is down here. So your regular A4 sheet of paper. I'm going to take this image, I'm going to press Command A, that will select all of it, Command C to copy, then I'm going to go inside here and Command V to paste. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to scale this, make this bigger. So I'm going to press Command T and that will transform, and I've locked in the width and height here. And when I do that, it means if I just drag this out, it's going to drag out the width and the height. If this is not selected, it will just stretch it. We don't want it to stretch. So I'm going to just take this down. I'm going to go something like this. And then here I have my image. The next thing I can do is I can start to bring in a grid. Now a grid, it's up to you how many squares you want on it, but how to create it on your screen. If you're going to draw from your screen, you can go to View, down to New Guide Layout, Click on that, and you'll see it creates this grid of columns and rows, and you can change the width of this. So I don't want to have my squares too small, so I'm going to bump this up quite a bit and see what happens. This is what it looks like at 300. I can change this to 300 as well, and got to make sure that the height and the width are the same because we want it to be perfectly square. So I'm going to just change this to 350, see what it looks like. And we can see that the width of these here and this one's a little bit longer, so I know if I just bump this up a bit more it's going to drag it out. So I'm going to 355. Let's see how that looks on the height. I think it's still a little bit wider than this one, so I'm going to bump it up a little bit more. Let's say 360. That's maybe a little too much, so 358. I think that's generally okay, so I'm going to go with that. Now I basically have a guide system that I can use to explore my image. So I can have my guide here, my square, and what I can do then on a sheet of paper is to create the same grid that I have here using the width of a ruler. So I can line a ruler up to a sheet of A4 paper, and it doesn't have to be the exact same, so we can cut our A4 sheet back, the paper that we're drawing on, if we need to. I think using the width of ruler can be a really quick way of getting a grid. You could measure it out. You could divide the width of an A4 sheet of paper by 7 here, and you could divide it by the amount of squares that are here also. But one easy way to do it is just to line up the ruler to the top, create a horizontal line, line the ruler up to that horizontal line to create this one, and each time you're just basically using the ruler width to create the horizontal lines. Same thing then using the ruler against the edge on the left to create this line here, and then moving the ruler to this line to create the next one, and so on across. That ensures that your grid is going to be the exact same size for each square, height and width, because you're using the width of the ruler, which won't obviously change. The one thing you got to make sure is that you line the ruler up to the edge accurately so that your lines each time are perfectly straight. You need to pay attention doing that. If the lines are off, it's going to cause problems. You need to also make sure that you draw very, very lightly. So I'd recommend using something like a H2H pencil and make sure it's very sharp. But don't put too much pressure on the paper, because you're going to want to take those grid lines away once you've got your drawing complete. But I hope you find this useful. This is just a simple tutorial to create a posterized black and white image and to grid it up, and then you can look at this in Photoshop anytime, open it up, zoom in, and you can really focus on certain areas where you want to draw some of those tones as you see them.